Hey there, it's Carrie Rhodes here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and my craft studio here in Eagle, Idaho. In today's video, I am making some gel press prints that are inspired by the artist Eric Carle. Eric Carle is a children's book author and illustrator, but he makes his illustrations with paintings that he has created, and then he takes those paintings and cuts them up and makes collages, and the pictures are actually collages made with his paintings. So I want to see if I can make some gel press prints inspired by his style. Then I'm going to take those prints and paper piece with them to make a card inspired by one of my favorite Eric Carle books, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So we're going to start by painting and gel press printing, and then we'll get to the card making. So stick around for the whole thing, and then let me know what you think of today's video in the comments below. All right, let's start painting. We're starting this video with gel press prints, so I thought I would show you the gel press here. It's very flexible, a little bit tacky, 8.5 by 11 matte. I will be using a brayer, which is the typical tool that I use to make gel press prints, but in today's video, I'm mostly going to be using paint brushes, these three in particular. And then I am going to be using some fun tools to create texture in my prints like Eric Carle has. Just some found items and some burlap, because it's one of my favorite things to use on the gel press. So those are kind of the things you'll see in today's video. So let's get started and pull out some acrylic paint. The first print I'm going to make is going to be green. I want each of these prints to have one main color so I can cut them apart and make a collage. So I'm using that flat brush and just brushing this paint on. I have 3 different shades of green, and they are going to mix a little bit, and still you'll be able to see the different colors that are represented here. So I'm just brushing that on when normally I would be using my brayer to spread it on. I want to be able to see those brush strokes. Then I'm taking this like kids plastic fork and creating texture in my prints. And this is the exact look that I see when I look at Eric Carle's artwork. So we'll go ahead and take a print of that on this 8.5 by 11 white cardstock, and that's amazing. I'm going to be taking 2 prints of each color. So some of that paint has dried onto my gel press. I am going to add a little bit more, just like using up the paint that's in my palette. And again, these are acrylic paints. I have some heavy body paints, I have some matte paints, I have some glossy paints. The paint doesn't really matter. So once that is completely dry, I am brayering over the top a very light layer of heavy bodied white acrylic paint. That is going to re-moisten that dry paint that is left behind. And I'm going to let that dry with the paper on it for about 5 minutes, and then you can see the print that I made. So here's both of the prints, and they are really, really cool prints. All right, for the yellow print, I'm doing almost the exact same thing as I did with the green, using 2 different shades of yellow. This is a little bit of a buttery yellow. It has a little golden color in it, and then I have a lighter yellow. So I'm just going to mix up these 2. I want to make one print that's a more light yellow and one that's a darker yellow. So you'll see me do both. Now to create texture, I wanted to use this sponge. But it didn't end up showing up as much as I wanted to, so I'm sad about that. But I did bring in this tissue paper roll, and am using that, overlapping it to create a pattern in this print, which is so cool and super easy to do. Just find things that you have around the house and imagine what kinds of texture you could make on your gel press prints. So we'll peel that off, and you can see those little circles, and there's tons of paint left on my gel press. So I'm going to cover this with a darker yellow paint, a brighter yellow. Now this print I was a little bit disappointed in. I thought I might be able to see a little bit more of the light yellow. You can see it when you look close, the circles and the texture, but it's a pretty solid yellow. But I do end up using the darker print in today's card. So here's both of them. You can see a still photo and the really cool texture in these prints. For the red, I had this bottle of acrylic paint that didn't have very much left in it, so I just kind of tapped it down onto the gel press itself instead of using a paint palette. And then I'm brushing that out in really wispy strokes that kind of go up into the air, so to speak, diagonal. Yeah. So that is that. I'm going to take a print onto, it's an old gel press print that didn't have much going on, so I just like to take prints over the top of those ones. And then I'm going to use some bright red paint over the top of that to pick up the leftover paint. But before I take the print, I'm pressing a piece of burlap on it, and I'm using the back side of a print that was a little ho-hum, and I'm cleaning my brayer off onto that print I already took. So now I have a really cool print just by brayering over the top. But let's check out the burlap print. Isn't that awesome? I love burlap on the gel press. So I end up using this first print in today's card, and I'll save the burlap one for another time. And now I am taking blue, 2 different colors of blue, to create this print right here. You can see there was plenty of paint left on my gel press from another print, and that's okay. It's in the blue family, so I'm going to go for it. I like to pick up old bits of paint on my prints. I like that shabby chic kind of look. And here you can see the amazing print that this created. So cool. All right, so now for my second print, I am going to clean off my brush, add some more paint to this, and this time I will bring in another tool to create some texture on this print. So I'm really just trying to use up the paint in my palette because I don't like to have to rinse a bunch of paint down the drain. So I have the back side of a paintbrush, and I just made little marks with it all over this print. And then I covered that with white. Once it was dry, I'll put the cardstock on, let that dry for about 5 minutes, and then peel it off, and look at this super amazing print. It looks like water. So cool. So here you can see both of those prints. The blue ones are so much fun. So cool. Next up is the brown print. So I have this really wide brush that's like for house painting, and it's really scraggly on the end. Like the bristles are not cut even, and so I'm getting some really cool brush strokes on my gel press with this brush. I'm using 3 different shades of brown and just covering my whole plate. Now, some of this dried a little bit because it was such a thin layer, so when you see the print that I pull up, you'll notice there's a little bit of white in this print, and that's just because some of it dried. I am going to add a little bit more paint in a very thin layer on here, and very little paint on my brush so I can get a lot of brush strokes. I'm going to cover that with gray paint, and I cleaned my brayer off on my first print to mute it down a little bit. I'm going to let that dry and then peel off this print, and you can see it got some of the paint left over from previous prints in the background. So that is it for the prints. I love the look. I feel like they're very Eric Carle inspired. And now I'm going to die cut those to create the pieces for my card. So you just saw the grass. This circle is the sun. I also cut 1/2-inch strips for the sun's rays. I used this die from the Forest Feast set to do die cut a stump, and now I'm going to do some stamping on my prints. So I stamped the butterfly on this random print that is actually from cleaning off my brayer and cleaning off some bubble wrap, because the butterfly at the end of the Eric Carle story is very colorful, purples and yellows and orange, so I decided I would use that print. And then I'm going to fussy cut all the things I stamped on the gel press print right on the black line so I can paper piece those over the top of some stamped images on white cardstock. Here are the rest of the images that I stamped on the gel press prints. Here they are all cut out. And then these are the images from the Bug Deal stamp set that I am stamping and cutting out with my dies on white cardstock. I don't end up using that stamped stump. I needed it for reference and wondered, could I stamp over the top of my gel press print with it? And in the end, I'm just going to use it as a guide. I will show you that in a minute. So now those pieces that I fussy cut, I am gluing over the top of the ones that I die cut. You wouldn't have to do this part, but I knew I wanted to do it for the caterpillar in particular, so I decided I would do that for all of them. Plus, when you have little things like antenna or feet, it's always hard to know if you should cut them off, cut around them, or what you're doing when you've stamped on top of a print like this. So I like to paper piece them. I will have a second video or another video where I did a very similar technique with gel press prints. I'll have that linked at the end of this video so you can check that out too. I am taking my Y06 marker and coloring around the outside of my little caterpillar because that's how he looks in the Very Hungry Caterpillar book. He has like a little yellow outline, so that's why I wanted him to have an outline. Now I'm going to add a little bit of Distress Oxide ink in the color Tumbled Glass, just at the about 3/4 of this panel because the bottom half will be covered with the grass. So I will just burnish that on. I want it to be pretty subtle and a little bit lighter towards the top so that I have a nice sky, but the pictures in the book are pretty subtle. Like the background is pretty subtle on a lot of them, so I didn't want to do too much. So I spritzed that with water to give it a little bit of texture to play in with the texture on everything else. I die cut this Your Sweet sentiment, and I actually do not end up using it. I didn't have enough room, so you'll see me remove that and kind of fix that later. So now I'm using that stamped stump as a guide to draw in some black lines to make this die cut stump a little bit more realistic with some of those lines. And I'll be honest with you, I am not 100% happy with how it turned out, but I also know that probably to anybody else it won't be as big of a deal as it is to me. If I had to do this card over again, I might try something a little bit different. I'm not sure what, which is why I never ended up changing it out. So now I'm going to start assembling the card, and in just a minute I will realize that Your Sweet sentiment is not going to work. Yeah, so I'm just laying everything out. I already laid everything out to kind of see how it would fit. And then I'm assembling it all together. And I realized my circle was a little bit too big. So I went ahead and cut some of that off and tucked it further down behind my grass. And then I'm going to add these 1/2 inch strips for the rays of the sun. And I didn't put the glue on the back of my sun all the way to the edge so I would have room to tuck these in. I decided doing 5 was going to be the easiest for me, but you could easily add plenty more. And this part of the card is the one part that really makes me feel like I'm creating an Eric Carle style work. You can research him on YouTube, and there's videos of him making his art, and I thought those were lots of fun. All right, so here's my little cupcake. And now I'm realizing, no, there's not enough room there for all the things. So even though I really loved how the Your Sweet looked, I picked it off. And I didn't re-die cut any grass. I decided I would just fix that. So I put my stump on with some foam squares, and then I'll add my little cupcake die cut with some of those gel press prints that we made. And then I also punched a hole in the cupcake because in the story, the Very Hungry Caterpillar ate through a lot of food. And in the book, there's actual holes in the things he ate through, just like you're seeing on this card. So that's what the hole is. I'm also coloring his eyes a little bit bigger because in the book, his eyes are quite big. Now I'm taking one of those colors of green paint that I used to make this gel press print and a little paintbrush and just coloring in, filling in those white spots where I had to remove the sentiment. And all is well. All right, so I am taking the Reveal Wheel Circle Sentiment stamp set to make a new sentiment for this card, and it is going to say, "Sending smiles to brighten your day." So I am having to do this after the fact just because I wasn't happy with the thing that was there. I'm just making sure it's straight, and then I'm going to ink it up with some carrot ink. So it's just like a shade darker than my sun. Pretty subtle, and I did end up stamping that repeatedly, probably about 5 times, yeah, so that it was nice and dark. And then I went ahead and stamped over the top of that with clear pigment ink, and I embossed the whole thing with clear powder so that it had a shiny look and stood out against that sun. For the inside of my card, I am going to be doing some more ink blending, and we're going to create a cute little scene on the inside with the rest of my stamped and paper pieced images. So I'm going to take that branch and put it in, and then I lost the rest of the footage where I glued the rest of the pieces in. So you'll see a photo of that right here, and I stamped happy birthday also from that Reveal Wheel Circle Sentiment, and I made the cocoon look like it had cracked open and the butterfly emerged from that, just like the end of the book. Also, the cupcake topper I was not happy with. I changed that out, and you'll see that in the photos at the end of this video. But there is my Very Hungry Caterpillar inspired card. I loved making this so much, and I have a lot of prints where I could create this look on a card in the future. I hope that you enjoyed it. I would love to know your thoughts, so feel free to leave a comment below. I will list and link all the things that I used below, so if you're interested, you can go ahead and check those out. And here are some gel press related videos for you to watch as well. All right, I will be back again very soon with a new video, so feel free to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to know the next time I upload a video. Happy stamping! Bye!